Thank you for taking some time to spend with us learning about a topic that's really important to risk management. And today we're talking about one component of crisis communication. Uh, I'm really excited to introduce to you two professional gentlemen that we have partnered with. We've asked to spend some time with us in a series of webinars. This is just one of a whole sequence of webinars on this important topic. So if you feel like we haven't hit absolutely every component of crisis communication today, you're probably right, because this is step one in a series of 7 to really deep dive into the topic of crisis communication. Very important when we're dealing with some of the types of things that the church faces from time to time. So we have a whole lot to share. And I don't want to take any more time other than to introduce to you the two gentlemen that I hope you can see on your screens. And they come from Kurth Lampe Worldwide, which is a Chicago-based strategic communications, issues and crisis management, public relations firm. And they do work around the world, and they have done significant work inside of with the Seventh-day Adventist Church organizations and institutions. So they have a broad base of experience and have an understanding of some of the situations that the church has faced over the years as well. I'm going to tell you their names here really quickly, but then I'm going to let them do more of the heavy lifting on real introductions there. Greg Dunn is a senior counselor with Kurth Lampe. Greg is the one who introduced the poll concept. Greg, say hi. And Kevin Lampe of Kurth and Lampe Worldwide is the executive vice president and has an incredible, robust experience in this field, as well as some incredible international experience around the world. Maybe we'll hear a bit more about that before all these webinars are done. Kevin, I'm going to turn things over to you. I will be hiding my screen. Folks, as usual, we're going to use all the tools of this webinar format. You know, we have, we'll probably share some things out with you via chat from time to time. Definitely use the question and answer feature. And as Greg pointed out, there's a poll that we're going to want to use as we go through the presentation. But for now, Kevin, really appreciate you putting this material together. Really excited to learn more about this important topic with your team. Take us through it, please.
To international human rights situations. We have worked in a variety of different crises, whether they be, excuse me, whether it be a humanitarian situation, or a tragic situation, or just some bad press, and trying to correct what the media is doing. That's a little bit about my expertise, and my associate Greg Dunn.
Yes. So I live in the world that a lot of you live in. I'm actually an Andrews University graduate. I've been privileged to hold some senior positions in a lot of global public relations organizations, public relations agencies around the world, doing a lot of crisis communications, a lot of reputation management. I spent about 11 years leading the reputation management practice for a leading US public relations firm. I've opened up offices for PR firms, but I also often start by introducing myself as a Pathfinder's dad. Love Pathfinders, love the church, obviously, as Dave has kindly said. Kevin and I have collaborated along with Kevy's wife, Kitty, who heads Kurth Lampe Worldwide. We've worked with the church on a number of challenging issues, and we're happy to share some of that perspective and expertise today. And really, sort of, as Dave said, we've got a series of webinars coming up. Reputation is kind of ground zero, so we'll start with that, and then we'll walk through sort of progressively increasing concepts about how to effectively manage and prepare for issues and crises going forward. So we're going to start right now by sort of looking at a few different definitions of reputation. I think by now, many of you have already seen the poll question. And so we will get right into some of these definitions, and then we'll talk about the poll results when we get there.
So reputation, the definition is up on your screen before you, but one of the ways to look at this is, for instance, what is the reputation of a corporation? And one of the examples is, how do people view Walmart? How do people view Target? Each of them have different markets that they're going after. Each of them have different reputations. Each of them has to deal with what challenges they have to the reputation, and whether it's a boycott that's being done against one store or the other, or whether there is a situation that arises, their reputation is important to explain what their position is. Warren Buffett has this great reputation quote here. It takes 20 minutes to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently.
And I think that's a critical concept from certainly from a corporate reputation standpoint, but really more globally, organizations of any type, and certainly with individuals as well. And I think the key takeaway is, just to sort of take a step back and think deliberately and strategically about the impact certain decisions or certain actions might have on your reputation. Here's another view on this important concept. Benjamin Franklin said it takes many good deeds to build a good reputation and only one bad one to lose it. And, let's face it, the Bible also spends a fair number of verses sort of talking about the importance of how we are viewed by people. Proverbs 22, verse 1, the NIV, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. So with that, do we have poll results at this point? Okay, so we have a series of poll questions today. The first one says, how important should it be to cultivate and maintain a positive reputation? I'm glad to see that nobody rated it. It is not important, or even only somewhat important. We absolutely would agree with you, especially those folks who said very important. And so we will talk today about how to, this is going to be fairly hands-on and fairly descriptive, and we'll talk not only about the importance of reputation, but also how to go about sort of deliberately cultivating that reputation as time goes on. So let's just start here. As I said, my background is really heavily in corporate reputation. But I think you can take these concepts and apply them, and we'll drill down a little bit more specifically into faith-based entities. But in the world that I have spent a lot of time in, corporate reputation, you know, a great reputation actually can provide a competitive advantage. So a reputation, a positive reputation, is not just sort of a nice to have. It's actually a vital tool in how corporations, in terms of an online presence, in terms of having good products and services, that reputation is important because it can actually be a differentiator. It can actually set you aside as an entity that people want to do business with and help you stand apart from the competition. So not just, when I talk about the marketplace, we're talking about investors, employees, communities, third parties. So both externally and internally, a reputation is absolutely vital.
So what makes up the elements of a corporate reputation? Ethics. Do people believe that the organization behaves and is an ethical body? Is it worthy of their respect? You know, is it trustworthy? Does the corporation live up to the values that it presents in public? The employees in the workplace, they are the deliverers of the reputation. They're the ones that people look at. You know, are people being treated well? It's like, you know, it's like there's a great story about one of the things that people should when they're evaluating a future life partner is how do they treat the waiter when they go into a place, and how does the waiter represent the restaurant, and how does that person represent and how does that person deal with the waiter in that situation? And then the financial performance. You know, does it is it giving value for the dollars it's charging? Does it manage its money well? Does it have a record of profitability? These are the things that make up the different parts of a corporate reputation.
So customer focus is, go to the next.
Yep.
Okay, customer focus. Does the organization care about customers? How does that come through? Is it a quality product, or is there a sort of a disconnect between the price that's being charged for perhaps a higher price for maybe a lower quality product? These are all elements that collectively make up a corporate reputation. Things like reliability, the emotional connection. Do you feel a certain affinity for the brand? All of these things help make up corporate reputation. Now, when companies are actually evaluated, I'm sure as you read media coverage about massive corporations or even smaller companies, and you hear terms about valuations, I think it's fairly easy to understand these tangible assets that go in. On hand. That part I think is easy to understand when you think about the value of a company. But what's less obvious, I think, to a lot of folks is that there are actually now more sophisticated metrics, again, in the corporate world, that show that there are intangible assets that actually are factored into a company's stock price, into how a company is evaluated. So when we think about the kind of goodwill that stakeholders have for a corporate brand, what kind of intellectual property do they have, such as patents, copyrights, and trademarks? And then obviously what we're here to talk about today, brand/reputation, that actually, it's, again, getting back to my earlier point, it's not necessarily nice to have, but it actually affects the actual valuation and the pricing of the company, how they do business in terms of business methodologies and such. And what we are sharing today is that, yes, we're talking at this point about corporate America, but all of this is very applicable to you in your roles within faith-based institutions. which is a nice transition to start talking about faith-based organizations. So again, we've sort of built the case for the fact that reputation is vitally important for corporations, but as you people, all of us today working within faith-based organizations, I think the case can be made, and we're essentially making it, that reputation is even more valuable for a faith-based organization. Because we are here modeling the love of Jesus Christ. So if we're not living up to that standard and developing a reputation that is sort of rooted in that example, how are people to think about us? Understandably, if corporations are going to be evaluated by their deeds, how much more so faith-based organizations? And when there's trouble in the corporate world, such as bad behavior by a senior executive, that's certainly going to affect the stock price. It's certainly going to affect how people think about the company. How much more damaging is that sort of? So now Kevin will, sorry. I want to talk a little bit more specifically about, we talked about the attributes that sort of comprise corporate reputation. Let's take that a step further. And within the world we live in as faith-based executives and leaders, what are some of those attributes that make up reputation in our world? So ethical behavior obviously would be at the top of the list. Do we live up to the ideals that Jesus modeled? That's going to be a key way in which we are judged. Do we show compassion and love? Does our organization live Jesus' love? Do we look out, for example, for the less fortunate? Friendliness, engagement with neighbors, all of these things. Do we live our professed values and trustworthiness? So we're going to, over the course of the next half hour or so, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to build that specific reputation that you would like to model and be known as in the community. But a lot of it is going to come back to these attributes, because that's just inherently how people think about churches and religious organizations.
So, I think we have a poll result to share. Yes, can you build a reputation? Very interesting. 81%, yes, you can control the elements that create. Sometimes there's 19% that also notice that sometimes they're out of your control. And I think that's actually an accurate representation, is you can control 80% of it, but 20% sometimes you can't control. So it matters how well you deal with that 20%. Excuse me. So brand versus reputation. Brand is what makes you relevant. Reputation makes you credible. And so we've got another question that we're going to be looking at now. Faith-based organizations concern themselves with reputation. And reputation, really the simplest thing, that is what others think about you and what you think about yourselves. The brand is the perceptions of current, past, and potential customers, but that reputation, that is something that is more challenging, and that is something that you have to watch out for, because that can change, as we talked about, so early, so much quicker.
which in turn helps increase receptivity to our messages. And at the end of the day, a strong reputation, a large part of the benefit of strong reputation, and we'll go into a deeper dive on this, is it helps to reduce risk, frankly, because people think more highly of us, we're more likely to get the benefit of the doubt, and we'll talk a little bit further about that.
Do we have results from the last poll that we took? Should faith-based organizations concern themselves with reputation? Very interesting. Yes, it's important that organizations that profess Jesus be good citizens, 28%. And then go down to the yes, ethical behavior is positive. Reputation is even more important than for companies. And then lesser extent, the yes, ethical behavior is positive is even more important for than companies. But B and D, came across as the largest two questions, which is very interesting. I think very important for us to look at.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the benefits of a positive reputation. So what are you going to get for all this hard work to protect your positive reputation, and what is going to be able to help you, and what's in it, for you and your organizations? People are going to trust you more. People are going to think good things about you as soon as they hear the name of you or your organization. The people that are already stakeholders, people that are already participating, either whether they be clients, whether they be members, whether it be whatever type of exchange that happens between people that have a stake within your organization, you're going to reduce your risk. What always we're doing, particularly in the risk management, is we're figuring out ways how not to let things happen. And the reputation, then, if you're protecting the reputation, the same things you're doing to protect the reputation are also going to reduce the risk of things going poorly and badly. And it's going to give you a kinder treatment. People are going to be able to look at you positively and look at you in a great light, and they're going to think of you as good before they get into any other opinions about you. They're going to start at a good place. Now, the risks of not cultivating a reputation in a faith-based setting. Decreased engagement. To be engaged, less wanting to be a part of what's going on. They're not going to want to contribute financially. They're going to stop, giving money. They're going to stop participating that way. If you don't cultivate it, it's going to take you longer. When something does difficult happen, it's going to take you longer to rebound. You're going to have to spend more time rebuilding the reputation and getting it back to the point where it's going to be important and it's going to be helpful to you. Heightened mistrust. People are going to be ones that are going to think, oh gosh, this is just them doing something bad again. And when you have a good reputation, you're going to be able to be in a position where people are going to be much more happier and much more trusting of your organization. And you're going to reduce the ability to attract new members they want to go. People want to be associated with the people who have the best reputation.
So we often think of reputation, we often describe it as a bank account, a goodwill bank account. So the notion is that the more you invest in advance when times are calm and you're not in the heat of a crisis, the more you invest in this account by doing good things in the community, living your values, demonstrating the many positives about your organization, you start to build that goodwill in your bank account. So the higher that balance becomes, the more goodwill you have to draw on in times of crisis, which equates to less damage from all sorts of standpoints. Less damage to your reputation, possibly less financial damage, shorter duration of the intensity of the crisis. And so goodwill, having that goodwill, having made the effort to cultivate your stakeholders and demonstrate, without any strings attached, that you mean well and are doing well, you get the greater benefit of the doubt. So the time really to build that reputation, to invest the time and the effort in that reputation is really now. before the heat of that crisis. So as we've talked about, reputation isn't necessarily, top of mind on a day-to-day basis, but it really actually needs to be. And that taking the time to do it the right way can yield tangible benefits to organizations such as yours. It only amplifies and really enriches our ability to fulfill our mission. And so when we do ultimately, and in the very likely event that we do find ourselves from time to time in trouble, facing a crisis, by having done this work, we've got that goodwill bank account to draw on, and not taking the time to do that now absolutely comes with some serious and tangible downside.
Reputation. Good reputation doesn't just happen, because if you're not defining yourself, someone else will define you. And so you need to have a thoughtful effort in order to build that reputation. The key steps: understanding how you're thought of today, going out and talking to people and listening to what they're saying, talking internally and externally, and finding out, what do people think about you? How are you perceived out there in public? Then you determine how you want to be perceived. What is your perception? What do you want to be? What do you want people to think of you? And then go out and survey the landscape. Take a look at what's going on. What's the reputation of people that work in the same space that you do, of people that do the similar type of work, understanding what they're doing. And then assess your assets and liabilities. What are the things that we do well? What are the things that we need to do better? And then you want to recognize the tools that are in your toolkit. What things do we have that'll help us to build a reputation, and identify those building blocks, and then craft a plan.
So we will go through these individually fairly rapidly. But in order to get where you want to go, it's really important to know where you actually are starting from today. Not just where you think you are, but to get a really good sense of where you actually are. So understand what people think about you today, internally, externally. And while in a perfect world, we would, recommend primary research to effectively gauge perceptions from employees, from church members, and from those in the community. That's likely going to be cost prohibitive. So at a minimum, have conversations. Start conversations with people in the community, with community leaders, with your members, with your employees, to really come at it from a standpoint of understanding their mindset and how they perceive you. And that will be an effective starting point for the other steps to follow.
It may be as simple as gathering a number of people that are important to the organization and sharing a meal and discussing, what do people think about us? How are we perceived? And then do a second or third meeting with some of the people that you serve or that participate in your programs, and just do an informal anecdotal information gathering.
From an internal standpoint, again, we want to know what people see as our strengths and weaknesses, to get an idea of what kind of goodwill they have toward us. And then from an external standpoint, how well are we actually known in the community? And then if how would they like to engage with us? How would they like you to engage with them in a more effective way, and in a way that benefits the community? And then we go on to understanding how we want to be known. So we start with, how is it that we are known today? But then we want to also deliberately decide how we want to be known going forward. So when people think about us, when they think about your organization, what attributes do we want them to have in mind? When they think about our organization in Northern California or Nebraska or Florida, how is it that we want them to think about us? So we go through this exercise of understanding where we are today, mapping out where we want to go, and then really being deliberate and strategic and thoughtful about how we want people to know us and what we want that reputation to be.
So now we have a benchmark. Now we can able to see, okay, this is where we're at today. Now we can understand where we need to get to and what we need to do in order to get to that desired reputation. Now, next we want to look at how are your peer organizations viewed? How are other people that provide similar services or take care of people in certain ways? How are they viewed? Now, the great reputation is rooted in the distinct values, that stand apart from other faith-based organizations. And then it's always better to stand out than to blend in with the pack. What makes you different? How are you doing things differently? How do you differentiate from the different people that are doing the same things that you are?
So then through your anecdotal research, your informal research, and also, combined with what you actually know, we actually put on paper what are those positive attributes and assets that people think about us today. Maybe they see us as an engaged community partner, or we know that our members view us very positively. So then we see, how do these align with the actual characteristics that we want to be known for? And then on the flip side, we also have to be honest and, sometimes harsh in understanding where are the gaps, what are the liabilities, what are the things people think about us today that we actually don't want them thinking about us, and how do we address that?
The tools that we have in our toolkit. So we are, first off, storytelling. What are the stories we can tell? How can we explain using the stories about things that have really happened in order that we can explain what's going on? The message. We have to have 3 to 5 key points that we want everybody to know, and we want to be able to talk about those on a regular basis.
Within the community, how can we better integrate ourselves into the community? Where can we network? Where can we be more visible and share what it is that we believe and what we do? And again, not from a self-serving perspective, but helping people understand more about us and sharing our faith and our beliefs in the community. From a media standpoint, it's helpful to be closely attuned to what's happening on talk radio, local newspapers, local blogs, local television, having a sense of what the media are covering at any good time, and then really thinking about how can we, all the interesting things that we're doing, how can we better fit into what the media is currently interested in?
And social media, the thing that everybody is talking about, everybody's participating in. How do we tell our story using the tools that social media, and how do we protect, cultivate, reinforce our positive reputation on social media?
And frankly, of course, all of us here communicate with employees and with members, and we understand, we sort of have a certain cadence and certain topics that we address with them, but it's possible that this is a good time to sort of rethink that. Are we communicating through the right channels? Are we saying the right things? Are we really being deliberate about that reputation that we want to build? Are we telling them the types of things that are going to further build the reputation in the way that we want to build it? So all of this, we think of this again as assets to leverage. Think about, to get where you want to go, what are the strengths that you've currently got today? If you're a local church, you have a highly engaging pastor who could be more visible in in ways in the community that help raise your visibility and better engage with folks. Do you have strong relationships with nonprofits? Are you helping out at the food pantry? If you're at a conference, perhaps the conference vice president has personal ties to the governor. So it's really just about thinking about the things that people definitely think very positively about today, and how do we incorporate that into an effective reputation strategy.
So now we're going to craft this plan. Now we're going to build what we want to do. First off, what is our goal? Where do we want to get to? If we don't know where we're going, we're never going to get there. What is our strategy? What are the things that will help us to reach that goal? How can
So Kevin kind of touched on these next couple of slides. Why don't we go ahead forward to the implementing the plan, number 53. And so the importance is, so we've got the goals, we know how we want to achieve those goals, we identify some of the tactics and activities we want to do. How do we really make that plan, the reputation building plan, work hard for us? So it's easy to slip into old habits, right? And you've done all this work to develop a plan, but now it just sort of sits on the on the shelf collecting dust, or hides in a folder on your laptop. You absolutely need to be committed once you have the building blocks in place, to actually implementing this plan. So make yourself maintain momentum by committing to reporting regularly to leaders in the organization. And as time goes on, again, it's not enough just to do a couple of things and then sort of step back, but continue to monitor and recalibrate as needed to make sure you're still on track. Okay,
So maintain the momentum, be talking to everybody on a regular basis, and then make sure as time goes on that you are staying up with what the plan is saying and that you're gauging your performance at various times.
So in brief, it's one thing to develop a reputation that's sort of great in the moment, but it's also important to understand reputation has to flex and evolve over time. So the issues that your plan, your reputation goals and plan address today may not be relevant, in 6 months or a year. And so it will be important to continue to make sure that you are still topical and relevant, and that your reputation is working as hard for you and in as relevant a way as possible.
The environment is going to change. That is the one thing that we can count on. We can count on that change is always going to happen. 2 years from now, there'll be different issues that'll be on the mind of your constituents. Excuse me. Now, how should you update your plan to make sure that you are maintaining relevancy and that you're still engaging? Keep your finger on the pulse. You're always worried about your reputation. You should be thinking about your reputation.
And so as we start to near the end of our content for today, it's also important to understand, you've done all this work and it seems to be getting fruit. You're hearing great things from, people at other faith-based organizations and from within the community. But at some point, you start to sense that perhaps your reputation isn't doing as much for you now as you thought it had been a year or 2 or 3 years ago. So let's just say, priorities change, work gets piled on your plate. Maybe reputation is no longer as big a focus as it once was. How do you know when the reputation has started to decline a bit? So as we go to the next slide, so warning signs might include, one day you're in the office and you start thinking about this and you realize that, wow, we were ahead of the game a couple of years ago, but now you realize that you're not even really thinking about reputation except when you get into the heat of that issue, and realizing that you don't have that goodwill bank built up to the point that you should in order to be able to draw on it, or that you understand one day that we're doing all these wonderful things. We have a healthy church. People are paying tithe and contributing offerings at a healthy level. We're actually growing, but our reputation is somewhat short of that. So what do we need to do to help our reputation catch up to reality?
You may start to see that social media starts to fall apart, or that your reputation online, people are disrespecting, or they are criticizing the organization more than normal, or they just don't understand what you're doing. Your membership or your giving numbers start to go down, and people are reaching out to you less than they used to do in order to partner with them. Those are danger signs that your reputation is starting to falter. Now, what can you do? You can re-engage stakeholders in conversations. You go back to where you did this initial, when you started talking to stakeholders, bring them back in and ask them what's going on. Review your plan to determine if it still working, or what you need to update it. And then keep doing the things that you've done in the past in order to actively protect and develop your reputation. And then report back to leadership and let them know about what's going on.
So we've covered these next couple of slides. So we will sort of deliver some concluding thoughts here. You're not in the heat of an issue and so on, and you're actually able to sort of step back and breathe and think through all of these elements we've talked about, all these steps in the process to build your reputation. Now, today, this week, this month is absolutely the right time to start working through those plans. For faith-based organizations like all of you work in, again, just a reminder that you're held to an even higher standard by constituents than corporate America, which means a very high standard indeed. A strong reputation absolutely can help you better navigate through those inevitable issues. We've talked about some of the facets of that, but it actually can make a significant difference in your daily life. Reputation is not something that you build once and walk away from. It's absolutely not a static asset, but more sort of a living, breathing attribute that needs to be carefully managed over time and reevaluated. Also remember, again, we're human, we get busy, our priorities shift. Maybe your reputation has declined more than it should have, but there is no such thing as permanent failure. If you had something that worked, you can certainly still replicate some of the steps that got you there, even if some of the aspects of your reputation plan need to be updated. But if you did it once, you can do it again.
And so now we will open the floor for questions. Yes, yeah. I just noticed this question, and I will share this. Yeah, that you'll be able to have access to a replay. And let me also say that you will do our. In fact, let me put it up now. We will. Here is. Let me. I hit the wrong button here. So here is our contact information. And Greg and I are more than happy to spend some time talking with anybody that wants to talk about any particular things or any particular concerns they have within their own organization. We would be more than happy to spend a little bit of time with you to kind of go over some things or take some questions. Certainly, please feel free to email.
Sure. You know me, always happy to say a few words. I just thank you. I mean, that was a crash course right into what I think is a foundational topic. And I'm glad that we started here talking about reputation as we go into this series of webinars. And I wondered if I might just highlight some of the upcoming topics that I really hope everyone will, now that you have this foundation, I hope you'll join us for the upcoming topics as well. Oh, I think we have the correct polling question up there. So folks, oh, perhaps not. Anyway, so the upcoming webinar topics are the difference between an issue and a crisis, how to identify issues and limit the likelihood that they turn into crises, a whole webinar on social media management in the context of crisis communication, when a crisis hits, what to do in the first hours, integrating communication and operations, and how to talk to or not to the media, a little bit of media relations 101. So those are some of the upcoming webinar topics that are scheduled. There's a page where you can register on our website, and of course we'll be communicating these invitations out in the same way that you received this invitation as well. So as Kevin mentioned earlier, this presentation was recorded. We will make it available, and the other presentations upcoming will be recorded and made available as well. Yeah, we're pretty committed to doing that with our presentations, because it's hard to get everybody schedules to align, right? It's we don't always make it all to the same time for the same meeting.
as can possibly be said, and that, you know, we do have to respect the privacy and the feelings and protect affected individuals to the full extent possible.
But we will also make sure that this point, and from this point of view, is particularly covered when we get into in more detail in some of the things to do in crisis management situations. But great question. Thank you.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, I really think we've scratched at something that's much needed, and I really appreciate the presentation today. I think we've pointed people. We've provided a link in the chat box to where they can see the upcoming schedule of webinars, those topics, how to register. We've created a page for all of that so that people can see sort of the whole plan on this track of webinars coming up. I'll leave it to you for any final comments as we close out here, but I just wanted to say for my part, thank you so much for putting this material together, and I can't wait to go through the rest of the webinars with you.
Terrific. It has been our pleasure. We enjoy working with you all. We think your work is so incredibly important, and we want to be able to help you to deliver that message to protect your reputation, but also be prepared when situations get difficult. On the screen are our emails and our phone numbers. If any of the participants want to get a hold of us, please feel free. We'll be happy to take your questions or comments and for about this seminar or any of the webinars that are coming up, but it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you this morning.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.